All right, it's Clint from the doorway too, hanging out with a few members of Oxbow, Eugene and Niko right now. But Dan may sneak in, so we'll see if it happens. But no, thanks for doing this. I really do appreciate it. I have been a fan. I'm 51 years old, so I'm in the same crew as you guys. I have been a fan for many, many years. So I would like to start with a question that I've always been perplexed by. So 9 times out of 10, I see that you are called a noise rock band. All right. And I feel like there is so much more than just the word noise rock to what you do. So to both of you, why do you think that that is the major definition, and how do you feel that it's tied to Oxbow?
I mean, obviously we're new romantics, right?
I mean, look, if you came up to me on the street and called me Frank, I would respond, but because I know you're speaking to me, but I would probably at some point or another correct you and let you know that my name is not Frank,
right?
That my name is probably Eugene, but you're never given that option when people decide to write about you. Now, there are probably real tactical reasons why this has happened, right? A lot of our early shows were with, the Boredoms or the Ruins or a lot of Japanese bands that people would have comfortably considered noise rock. We played with Scratch Acid and Jesus Lizard, which people would call the same thing, but nobody's ever asked us really if we thought we were noise rock. So, and did we stop it? No, I mean, call me Frank if you like, just don't call me late for dinner, right? Some horrible dad joke like that. So
we had an early review of our first record, and the guy is a quite famous journalist of Fluxfest, our first record, and he said, my efficient filing system is confused. So genre obviously helps people to file bands, and they can say, oh, when I feel like this, I want that. And then so that was something that happened to us. My kids are trying to break in here. Hang on.
Yeah, I got the same thing.
It's always.
Hey guys,
it's always
can you give me a break here? Yeah, I'm talking to this guy, so could you give me some time here? Thank you. Thanks, kids. I'm talking to this guy on the phone. I'll see you later. Yeah, I'll see you later.
Good.
Yeah, okay, I'll see you later. Oh, good. This is part of the interview now.
It's all good. No, it's all good. Like, this is real life, man. This is the world. I'm good with this. Sure. Like, good dads are important in this world, my friend. Good dads are important.
Yep.
Absolutely. I think that Dan is trying to get in. Speaking of good dads,
he hasn't tried to connect in yet.
Oh, okay.
It'll pop up if he did.
Yeah.
Okay.
But no. Thanks for answering that question. I totally agree that that's kind of like what
yeah. Niko, could you mute?
Oh yeah. Hang on. Let me see. This is a different system that I usually. Let me see. Does that work?
Yeah, it's stopped now.
Okay.
No, I can still hear the kid. I just can't see Niko.
Oh yeah, yeah, Niko, you disappeared.
Okay, let's see. I can hang up. There you are.
There you go. You're back now.
And how do I get rid of? Good. How do I get rid of the sound?
There's a little microphone button on the bottom left. Right next to the camera. Yep, he's muted. Okay.
Yeah, you're muted. Cool. So thank you very much for answering that question. I appreciate it. So what I want to kind of do is talk about 3 specific records that to me are the ones that are my favorites. And I kind of want to talk about you guys recording them and things like that. The first one is going to be the first record that I heard, an Evil Heat. That's where I jumped on board with the band. So when I heard that, I had heard a lot of other bands that had done jazzy elements and classical elements mixed together, but never as aggressively mixed, noisy, jazzy, classical, kind of avant-garde. So can you kind of talk about an Evil Heat for me? And I know it's your only record on the Rot, right? You don't have another record on the Rot Records. That's
true.
The only one. Yeah. Okay. So can you kind of talk about how that happened and why there was just one on the Rot and you kind of did your kind of like rest of the legacy with Hide Your Head, except for the new record. So.
Well, we could talk about the history of record labels, which is a lot of record labels,
Yeah.
which is fine. And we love Neurot, and obviously we love all those guys. And so that's just the way it worked out, as far as putting it out with Neurot. And that record, yes, so you know enough about us. I'll just say for people that maybe don't know, I think the divisions between music are false. I actually went and did a jury duty here in the United States. I think it's probably true all over Europe as well. You have to do jury duty frequently. So I was talking to the judge to be considered to be on the jury, and he said, "So what kind of music do you think you make? Would you say it's like this and that?" It was somehow relevant to the discussion, and I said, I told him, I think divisions of genre are mostly false. Everyone sort of looked at me like, you can't talk to the judge that way, but it's true. And so I think, I use the same language that you do. That record has elements of jazz, classical, maybe avant-garde, certainly rock and roll, certainly some noisy shit, and lots of guitar feedback and lots of screaming and shouting and tender things, and sensitive lyrics and quiet contemplative music. And so I think that the human experience is that. If you go out on the street, there's car wrecks, and there's little kids that are looking for a hug. And I would like our music to reflect our experience as humans. Music sometimes can be a refuge from real life. That's not what I like about music. What I like about music is when it reflects the way that I feel, the way that I see music. And it turns out that most people have the same experiences that we do. And when we share that, that makes for a greater experience. And that makes something powerful about stuff, about sharing the arts. And that's how it came about. I should say that when we made that record, we rehearsed intensely. And there's moments where the meter changes, and where there's polymeters, where there's Greg is playing a 5 and a 7 and a 5 and 7, and the guitar goes 5, 6, 7, and we come around and meet up. And then there's different tempos, poly tempos, that eventually meet up again. So it's extremely complex. And when you hear, oh, did they mean to do that? It sounds like they're a little off. Yes, we meant to do that. That was our chance to go out with so much rehearsal. Other records have crazy things in the recording, but that is us playing live, doing stuff that most people shouldn't try to do. Stuff that, yes, the Ruins do, that other bands do. Black Flag does that sometimes, crazy tempos that come and go, and everybody gets off, and then they gel together, and it's really powerful. And again, reflecting human experience. And I need to hear that stuff, and we will do that again. Nice. So that's what I think about Evil Heat there.
There's something kind of magical about how Oxbow was born and how it continued, and that was, we've never, this ties into the genre question, we've never felt particularly embraced by anybody. Right? Like, I mean, the Fuckfest was created out of maybe an overly mordant sense of misery at not being embraced, in a very specific terms and in a very macro terms, and this is lonely music. If it had found itself into a genre, maybe we would have, we were a skate band, we could hang out with other skate bands, or we would, but we have never had a perception of ourselves as being part of. And indeed, the show record reflects that. We've played with King Diamond, and we played with Peter Brotsman. I mean, this is a pretty wide parameter of opportunities that we've been given that have been really cool. But it just, and indeed, we are finally sort of embraced. But largely, at least my perception, I speak for everybody, is that we have not been embraced. And that, again, segues into the label discussion. It's every single record we have, despite having previous records that have tested out, it's been a real chore to get a label. And Neurot, those guys knew us, and Steve Montel had approached me at a show, and I remember thinking, he's joking. He's fucking around. He's not going to follow through on this. And sure enough, he emailed, and we put the record out. And then after that, he's the one who said, hey, listen, these guys from Hydra Head want to put you out. And I said, no, fuck that, we're loyal. And he's like, no. He says, no, they have a little bit of money. And I was like, fuck that, we're loyal. And he's like, Steve just kind of like sat me down and was like, look, they have money. In other words, I'm setting you free. You should do this. And which was funny because when Neurot had decided to put out An Evil Heat, they were undecided as to whether they were going to put it out on vinyl, which they ultimately did not do. But Kristen, who was running the label at that point, said what you should do is contact this guy Aaron at Hydra Head. And so I wrote Aaron an email and said, hey, we've got what you put at Aaron. I mean, which is funny considering how our relationship has changed over the years. Aaron said, sent back an email that was very pithy. Said no. It was like no, period. Thanks for writing, Aaron Turner. And I think I kept that for a long time because it amused me, because eventually somehow between then and us joining Hydra Head, he changed his mind. And I don't think he ever really fully explained why, but whatever happened was magical, and we're glad to have it happen. In fact, he had shit canned the label, but then heard Thin Black Duke, and then said, all right, we're going to try something else. We're going to revive the label. Instead of putting out a bunch of records, we're going to put out 4 a year, so I can work on each record. Gets 3 months. I can work on it consistently. And he picked us, and there were 3 other bands, but one of the bands, and I'm not sure who, blew it and made it an unpleasant experience for him. So he was like, yeah, we're really finally done now. And so we were back hunting. And if I told you how many labels we approached to get Love's Holiday out, you would be surprised. It was more than I would have liked. And I've heard, but a lot of it in the early days, a lot of it was just me putting myself in places where just any person would go, what are you thinking? Like, I mean, I should never have been talking to Tony from Fat Records to put Oxbow out. But when Fuckfest was, that was a long time ago. So it sort of made sense to ask him, or Alternative Tentacles. Why was I pursuing that? That would have been a completely horrible place for Oxbow to be, which I think Niko actually said at the time. I don't, but it was not like Biafra had any great shakes or interest in us in any way. So
I don't know if I said they would be awful. We don't need to get into why. But
no,
why.
okay, yeah. No, I don't want to figure you, as you said. It was. I later came to the conclusion I thought it would be a bad fit.
Sure.
And there was even some talk at the time when SST approached us that, well, I mean, the rumors had already started to filter back that they were not paying people and it wasn't going well, and but they were such a legacy thing, and we had a great experience with them as well. They paid up front, and we paid us afterward, at least once, and they were very nice. They're nice to us in person and in practice. It was they were. After we get the actual labels, I don't recall having any super negative label experiences. So, thank you.
Cool. No, cool, very cool. The next record I kind of want to talk about is the very next one, the Narcotic Story. And I feel like if there's a record that I could play someone and say, listen to this record and you'll get Oxbow, like that's the record I feel like I can hand them. So can you kind of talk about that record for me as well?
Interesting. So then we get into, we've been making records with Joe Ciccarelli for since Narcotic Story. That process started probably in 2004. We started recording 2005. The record is out in 2007 on Hydra Head. I think we delivered it mastered in 2006. It took about 12 months to get out. So it's really fun for me. I get to start the music and to have a target in mind. So when we made a couple records with Steve Albini, I kind of knew how the recording experience was going to go. We did The first record we did was Steve in '93 here in San Francisco. It came out in '95. And we spent 4 days, 4 12-hour days, setup, recording basics, overdubs, mixing, and then we were done to tape, and we mastered it with John Golden. So the kind of music that is going to work, especially Oxbow music, is going to be first or second take at the beginning, very simple overdubs, and the mixing, they're not complex. That was a great record, Let Me Be a Woman. And so you asked about Narcotic Story. Those songs were tailored to work with Joe Ciccarelli. Joe is an amazing technical person, engineering, an amazing musical mind, and he has a lot of great stories too. So, but Joe has the ability, he doesn't have to, Joe has the ability to make records that people understand. And so when you say, Clint, this is a record that I would show to people to say, this is understand Oxbow, that's cool. And that's something that Joe brings to our group's work. He lets people understand us better. And it's not changing us. We're just, doing. So those songs and that record was tailored to work in that framework. We had some time to do it. We did technically, we recorded to tape and then did overdubs in Pro Tools and synced them together, which worked great. We did that for An Evil Heat. Tape, Pro Tools, the computer chasing the tape. So Pro Tools would actually speed up and slow down. We can talk about that, which is a really cool thing. But that allows some crazy editing and really nice fat sounds on tape. We didn't do that the next record, so that was part of making Narcotic Story, was that technical thing. We did it in San Francisco. I did some home recording on Pro Tools, the digital stuff, and you can hear Oxbow start to change at that point to try to, again, to be understood, to get the message across, to get that connection, that human connection that we're all going for, to be stronger. So clearer sounds, some simplicity, some crazy stuff for sure. And the story. So for me, the music on that record goes, the story kind of, if I could paraphrase Eugene, the story begins at one point, high and low, successful, but unhappy. The success of this particular character seems to fall out. He's unsuccessful at the end, yet happy at the other side. So there's a progression. The music has a similar progression on purpose, and it's really the difference between tuning systems. So as you know now, the piano is tuned a certain way. The well-tempered clavier Bach was celebrating that in 1640 or whatever it was. So it's been around a long time. But before that, you could tune things differently. And that is kind of represented by the free, it's the naturally occurring overtones, the natural state of humans. So if that's the analog for the happy dude, you've got natural tuning. And then we have the piano, which is really hyper clean and very in tune and somewhat like the successful dude. And these are the two warring entities, and they also make a change so that at the end of the record, we've gone from major to minor and natural tuning to, so that's what I think about when I think about Narcotic Story.
Cool.
Super fun.
I think it wasn't that done at that place in Marin? Then we started there.
No.
What was that?
At the plant. You're right. We did the basics at the plant. We did overdubs at SF Soundworks.
That's right. So the plant is where Metallica recorded, right? And actually Prince, I think, recorded.
And Stevie Wonder.
Stevie Wonder and
Fleetwood Mac.
Songs of the Key of Life. Fleetwood Mac. Rumors was begun.
We pulled in there, and Joe listened to the room and was like, it's like he hated the sound of it, and and we said, look, we have to go to Home Depot, like buy some we have to change his room, you know? So we did it. And the woman who was the studio manager at that point, she was like, "What are you doing?" I said, "Well, the room doesn't sound good." And she was like, "Well, it's good enough for Metallica." Yeah, well, you just made our point. So,
Right. It's not good enough for Oxbow. So
yeah, exactly. You know, I think we spent a bunch of hours putting up these plywood baffles and yeah,
On the ceiling, a tent on the ceiling.
yeah. She was distinctly unsympathetic. Yeah, no, I like, yeah, listen to those records and listen to our records, please. You know, but the titular character, you know, Frank Johnson in the Narcotics Story, you know, was sort of semi based on a person known to me. And I'd have to say that in the fullness of time, everything's worked out really well for him. So there is, if you want a coda for that, the guy is actually doing exceedingly amazingly well right now. I should have such problems he has now. So
nice.
So there is that record does have a happy ending in many more ways than one. So
cool. And hey, Dan, thank you for coming. Welcome aboard, man. I'm glad that you're here. So
sorry, it took me a while to get in.
No, you're all good. I'm glad to have the three of you here and talk. So the last record I want to kind of talk about in the trilogy of records that I adore. I'm going to go backwards now, because what I did is I heard these two records and I said, "Oh, look, Oxbow has these other older records. Let's see if they're different or not." So what I did is I got to hear King of the Jews, and to me, it is the most wonderful, difficult listening of a record I've ever heard. And the reason why I say this is I feel like it's the most chaotic you've ever been, but like I feel like there's a lot of interesting things that have never been done since forth on a record like that. So can you kind of talk about that record to me for that kind of response?
Yeah, that was a really fun record. May have permanently damaged our relationship to the guy that recorded it, Bart Server.
Yes, he never worked with us again.
That's not true. Actually, he did the long piece at the end of
right.
Evil Heat, the 32-minute Shine Glimmer.
It should be noted that Gibbs Chapman, who also did an Evil Heat, it never worked with us again.
Be that as it may. So the second record, it's just more. It's more. And for me, how did that music come to be? As a kid, there was lots of music in the house. So rock and roll, I loved Jimi Hendrix. There's classical music. There's jazz. I played jazz, fiddled around with classical music. And then I went to music school, and I had some amazing teachers, and they introduced me to a lot of music that influenced the way that Fuckfest sounds, our first record. And when we go more, we get more of that stuff. So again, multi-tempos at the same time, polymeter, polytempo, poly-key, and that was really fun to do in the studio. And as I said, Evil Heat explored performing that live, whereas King of the Jews is mostly done in recording, getting that chaos in recording. But the recording, so we did things like, oh, let's make a tape loop, but that's not enough. Let's take the tape loop and then put our fingers on it, make it slow down and speed up. Let's take the tape, and what happens if you run it in front of a hairdryer? Does that really degrade the tape? That's not enough. More. And so, 18 months, month after month after month of doing that stuff. And it was really fun. And I think that makes the record really special. Kids are back. Hi, guys. So you're on, Eugene.
Let Dan.
So this is the first record I played on. And one thing that was peculiar for me is that I was also in a course of study that had me doing things like pulling lots of all-nighters and really, really, really swamped. So one of the things I remember most was coming in and out, and partly never quite knowing what's going on, which kind of maybe always the case when we're working on new music a little bit, but maybe it was a bit more. But most interestingly was coming in and having missed some of the sessions and then hearing how things had changed and progressed, which was pretty great. And also, it was the first time going through the process with the folks in Oxbow and with Bart and so on. So, and then I guess lastly, it was very different music than I had ever played, but in a way, it kind of combined everything that I love about music. Similar to Niko, I grew up hearing lots and lots of R&B and jazz, and played a lot of jazz stuff, and was into all sorts of rock and new wave and whatever, everything. And so it was great to be for the first time in a band trying to mix all of this stuff together in a way that still was its own thing.
Yeah, I think that to me, both with Fuckfest, which there was never any intent to do a record beyond Fuckfest, at least initially, based on the plot I had for my life. But King of the Jews seemed to it was born out of the cautious embrace of some folks overseas who heard Fuckfest and really liked what they had heard. This being credit where credit is due, Kevin Martin, who started a record label called Pathological, who decided to put it out and then asked that great record label question, record label guy question, do you have anything else? And indeed, when I was thinking about it, it's like the world's longest suicide letter, because you always want to do that thing, like you say, and another thing, and another thing. You know what? And I forgot, and the other thing. So they to complete it. I said, oh, okay, well, yeah, you got these lyrics that make some sense to tell the story. But what was joyous about it for me, and that's still one of my all-time favorite Oxbow records, is that with both Fuckfest and King of the Jews, in my experience making music, which goes back to 1980, right? I didn't start making music until 1980. My first forays into making music, I was making a type of music, right? Like I said, I liked hardcore. I want to be in a hardcore band, so I would play hardcore, right? This was the first time, kind of, that with Oxbow, that like Dan, to build on what Dan was saying, where it was just, no, we're just going to make some music. We're just going to make some music. I don't have time to think about who's going to listen to it or where. It'll catch the ears of people whose ears it should catch. And so I remember it. I remember being conscious of that happening for the first time on King of the Jews. I wasn't so conscious of it on Fuckfest.
Cool. No, I appreciate that. Thank you for the feedback on all those records. So, Eugene, this is going to be a question directed towards you, and then Niko and Dan, I have a question directly coming towards you. But vocally, you're one of my favorite vocalists, and
Yeah,
I won't say singer. I will say vocalist, and here's the reason why: because you give me hope, chills. It's haunting. It's dark. I love the way the spoken aspect comes. I love the jazzy kind of groove element. I love when you go very aggressive and get screamy. But when you've had 30 plus years to be able to hone your art and craft your art. When you first started, did you think Eugene back in 1980 would still be doing what he does now in 2023?
No, I didn't really have any clear. I mean, in 1980, I thought I was going to be a biologist, so I didn't have any, and I was still dabbling in like stage theater, and before I started making music. And the first band I was in, I played saxophone badly. It was called Al and the X's.
Nice.
And we decided, I think, said we got to play shows. Well, you're going to book the shows? I go, we don't need to do that. We're going to do things completely differently. And they said, well, what are we going to do? So we're going to go into places where we think they need music, and we're going to play. And that's when I learned out there's a certain magical element to a saxophone, because if you're a black guy and you pull out a saxophone, people think, oh, something cool is going to happen.
Very true.
That's so great. I mean, we played about 8 shows, and people were like, "Oh," about 3 minutes in, sounded like Albert Eiler, but without the
They thought,
technical proficiency.
oh, nothing cool is happening.
Right. So yeah, I mean, I could not have ever imagined that that I would have been here. But I'm in the process of moving stuff from one house to another, collecting, and I'm going through, and I remember finding sketches that I had made when I was sitting in class, of stick figures on a stage, like playing, and so I knew that something, when I stopped acting, pretty much, or said I don't, acting doesn't make me feel good. I don't like hanging out with actors. It doesn't make me feel good. I liked hanging out with people who were into music a lot. Um, um, I, yeah, I kept thinking for a long time, I'm going to grow out of this. That's not where it's happened. I mean, does Picasso grow out of painting? You like to do it. It's something that you continue to do. So, and in vocally, there, when I think about the early pitfalls, and they're, for a vocalist, there are always pitfalls, right? Because you listen and somebody catches your ear and you go, oh, and then you read the reviews, and early reviews would say like, oh, there's something butthole surfer-esque about Oxbow, and you go, oh yeah, well maybe I should drill down on that, or maybe not even consciously. You kind of, by osmosis, you pick up this Gibby that, and there were so many of those pitfalls, and it was. I have to probably largely credit the music with with being a constant reminder, to our true north, that this doesn't, butthole surface-esque, that's for the writers to write about. It's not for us to do. And I think the only thing that I was mindful of, I wanted to get to the voice that I'm using on Love's Holiday, but I knew there were many steps to get to that voice. So if you listen from Fuckfest to Love's Holiday, you can actually hear those steps. If we were fully capable of doing Love's Holiday after King of the Jews, but like Dylan saying, I could sing better than Caruso if I wanted to. I just don't want to. It didn't make sense to do. I had that experience with Muru Muru, the second Whipping Boy record, where I wanted to do something really adventurous, and the entire audience said, "Fuck you." so ultimately, with people, the one negative review I read of Love's Holiday, the guy was like, man, this is dad rock. This is how'd they go soft? This is the voice I've been trying to get to for 30 fucking years. Back off.
Nice.
Yeah, no. So anyway.
No, thanks, man. No, I appreciate it. So Niko and Dan, question for you. So I feel like the secret sauce that I get when I listen to Oxbow throughout the 20 plus years I have loved the band, is there's this tight interlocking groove between the two of you. Okay. You almost know what the other one is playing, and you can kind of feel it. And I put Greg into that too. Like the three of you kind of all together, like you feed off of each other. Like I almost feel like, Dan, you hear what Niko's doing. Okay, I can do this. Or Niko, you hear what Dan's doing. I can do this. Can you kind of talk about the melodic kind of hook and groove side of Oxbow that's not talked about much, but is so much there?
I'm really fortunate to play in a band with go ahead, Dan. Go ahead.
I'll finish out. I'm very fortunate to play in a band with a guitarist like Niko, who no, I think it is an interesting thing, because I think that groove is such an essential part of what makes our music, and there's all sorts of other elements which make our music really interesting, and we always tend to settle on a groove, which is very deep and very important, and it's such an essential part of the feel of the music, and certainly. I love that about playing in the band, just because we end up with great grooves and very interesting grooves, and they're subtly, I don't know, each one's got its own little unique twist, and these things just kind of evolve, probably because we spend so much time playing through this music as we're developing it. And if it just feels like a groove that that we know and have heard a lot, it doesn't feel quite right or something. So we keep working on things, and it evolves into the groove that that song needs. So they end up, I think, being really well matched. And there is a conscious effort, I think, for us to keep pushing things until they lock in a certain way that not just is, oh, that feels good, but oh, that's interesting as well. And Greg's a spectacular drummer. You know, he plays things that might sound on the surface like, oh, that's a rock groove, but then you dig in and listen, and man, there's just all sorts of interesting stuff going on, and all sorts of interesting interpretations of the time. And I think I kind of play you know, similarly. There's other elements that I'm injecting, and the thing that's interesting is we are all injecting our own things, and they all add together, and we happen to be very fortunate that they work together, or we're able to eventually get them to work together.
Yeah.
But you can't I don't think you can make great music without a groove, but there's an infinite number of grooves to be had. You just got to figure them out and find them.
Niko, do you want to throw something to that?
Yeah, I was going to say that fortunate to play with Greg, who's been a drummer forever, Dan, who spent a lot of time playing drums. I love drums. I never spent any time playing them, so it remains, you know, something that I'd like to do. But we all maybe appreciate that instrument, and that, I think, helps us to get our brains together. And then the other obvious thing about the groove, the way that we play together, is that you hear on recordings that we record together. Mm-hmm. There's very little spots where there's no guitar played at the same time with bass and drums. And that helps to gel things. I've moved away from playing in low tunings to stay out of the way of the bass, because it makes for clearer recordings and makes the music clearer, but also gives Dan's instrument the space that it is due. And I'm super conscious increasingly over our lifespan to become simpler and more clear in my playing, and that gives those guys, Dan and Greg, space to do what they need to do. There may be a day when we all do that. Those guys tend to more improvise during the recordings, and I don't, and that's, again, out of respect for those guys. Want to improvise and to have new things in the recording while we do a song, and how can I make that possible? So that makes the guitar be, I play the same thing every time. Yes, we give and take, and there's some tidal movements within the tight tempo, but you know, that's really apparent in the recordings that we're making. Cool. And live, everything's out the window.
Yeah, I figured that.
Yeah, and I would comment that the improvisation that Greg and I might be doing is because we're still not quite sure on the music that we're recording, and we're reacting and trying to trying to do what needs to happen in the recording session. But it's not like broad scale, you know, free jazz improvisation. Obviously, it's more subtle sort of twists and turns, and maybe injecting something slightly different into the groove or something. So it's a very sort of constrained, surgical sort of improvisation, maybe I'd say.
Yeah,
sure. Cool. So I kind of want to go back on a second for what Eugene said about your new record, Love's Holiday. I feel like if people are giving flack about it, it's because you guys are so talented and I'm not just playing this off like this, but you guys are so skilled and use obscure instrumentation and use kind of different tactics than a normal traditional rock band would use. I think we've been desensitized over the last like 20, 25 years that when you make a really great, strong record, like this new record is probably the strongest record I've heard you make since like an Evil Heat or since Narcotic Story. So like I said, I feel like you're back in that groove again, and people are always expecting you to be something different. And that's not what I expect from Oxbow. I just expect something that I want to hear that's intriguing or interesting. And that record is one of the more interesting records you guys have made. So I kind of wanted to ask you on that. Now that you're where you're at, like at this point of your career, is there anything different you would have done on Love's Holiday? Or do you feel like it's the record you wanted to make and it came out as is?
Oh yeah, that's the record we wanted to make. It reflects our experience in the years that we were creating it. I'm very happy with the record. And, you know, if anybody has anything to say about the record, like, man, thanks for listening. Yeah. And also, I'm interested.
I thought for a second you were going to say it to our faces.
Don't hide. Right here. No. No, actually, no, don't say it to my face. So that's cool. And I am interested in what people have to say because I want to make our records better, you know, for me, and maybe other people will enjoy them more. So I listen to what my bandmates say. I listen to what the people that we make the records with, the second engineer, the engineer, the mixer, the mastering engineers. I learned so much from John Golden. I've been attending mastering with John since 1986, maybe 85. You know, John's a little bit older even than we are. It's a beautiful thing. You learn so much when you listen to people, and people that listen to our records. Yeah, you know, let us know. I think it's a good record too. I'm very proud of it. And that's the record that reflects us.
Nice. Awesome. So on that, I'm going to kind of twist the tables for a second. And I want to ask you, because I'm always intrigued. So let's say somebody has never heard Oxbow before, and they're going to hear you for the very first time. And you can give them one record of yours to listen to. Which one would you give and why?
I'd give them the new record.
Okay.
You know, we've done a lot of different songs, and there's a lot of different moments. If you listen to the quietest part of The Valley from our first record versus the middle of Letter of Note, where the strings, the orchestra is going off and in a different tempo than the rock and roll band, and it's pretty chaotic and a little like off-putting, and it makes you think that maybe you've taken psychedelic drugs, maybe, I don't know. And so I got into this thing of thinking about what if every song had all elements, and I've gotten away from that too. We could go talk more about that, but I think the new record is a good discussion of what we do. There's everything that we've done, and it's where our heads are at now. So that's my answer.
I usually start people off with, you know, the correct thing, of course, is to start them with the newest thing because you want them to buy it. But usually, if it's somebody who's really serious, seems to me serious, in expressing an interest, I usually tell them to start with King of the Jews, and I do that for one specific reason, because if you make it through King of the Jews, you are in a place where you've understood that with this music, anything could happen. Right? Like, you know, your expectations at this point in regards to what it is we doing musically are just level set at zero. So you can, if you can make it through that, I think you can approach all the others with a mind that is open. Whereas if you, I mean, I guess you could do that with them all, but I wanted to do that in a really expansive kind of way that in a certain way signaled that, you know, whatever you heard when you heard this old rock, when somebody said rock and roll, you had an idea of what it was and what it sounded like, that's not this, So that's what I started with.
It's interesting. I think I probably start people off, tell them to listen to Serenade, because Serenade in Red is an interesting record that takes these elements. I think it was maybe the first time where these elements start forming into a sonically. It's a sort of a more integrated, beautiful sonic adventure, and it's got all of these different elements. Those elements showed up in Fuckfest and are still showing up, but somehow the arc on that record, it just sort of hits you like a club with each different type of sound, each different type of music, whether it's beautiful and slow or whether it's extreme and loud. It's all just kind of just joins together so nicely as a story and is sonically so great. And I figure, that one gives people a fighting chance that if they're not quite getting it, if they listen, hang on for another 30 seconds, they'll find something else to see if they like that.
Cool. No, awesome. So I'm going to have two more questions for you, and then I'll wrap it up because I know we both, Eugene and I, we got things we got to do as well. So I appreciate it. But so I kind of want to go back early on to before Dan was here. Eugene said that it was quite a struggle to find the proper label for Love's Holiday. What makes Ipecac the right label? Like what did they say or what did they do that you said, okay, this is home for this record?
They said they'd put it out. And after that, the audience that they have is amazing. A smart person, bands traditionally go out and find labels because labels do some of the work, so you don't have to do all the work to get your music in front of people. It's amazing. You could do it yourself. What do labels give? They give context to your music. So we're in a pretty cool context with a lot of interesting music, and a lot of people, I do that too. Oh, that's out on that record label. I'll give it a chance. So it's a very cool thing. They've been very helpful. Ipecac has been amazingly helpful. And I'm just excited to get all those ears. Yeah, what?
Keep in mind, we've been asking Ipecac to put us out for years.
Yeah.
So there is that.
Nice.
And of course, being frank-speaking people, we did ask them. They said, we've been asking you guys for years. Why now? And they said in a very interesting way, in a very honest way, they said, well, we always figured Oxbow was more of a live proposition, which, and then if that wasn't clear enough to put a point on it, he said, but we weren't really feeling the records. And it wasn't until, I think largely what they said, it wasn't until Narcotic Story that we started to go, oh, and it started to make sense to them. So it wasn't hard. It was just as hard for us to find a label for a Love's Holiday, but once we asked them, they were there immediately. I mean, if we had never said, hey, 8th time in a row, we're going to try to find a label, would you want to, if we had never asked, I don't know if they would have approached us, but, under Aaron Turner's a guiding hand, we figured, okay, let's see if they're interested, and they ended up being interested. So
very cool. Dan, you want to add anything to it, or did they cap the T and dot the I enough? Cool, awesome. All right.
Yeah,
so
no, I mean, what fires me up about it is that they, what they said is, we wouldn't be here if we didn't really dig it. And now that we're here, we really, really dig it. So to me, that's all I'm asking for, to have, able, excited. In fact, if they didn't dig it and still did the same things, I wouldn't be happy. Like I actually, the people pleaser in me wants them to be happy for a lot of different reasons,
Awesome. I'm just gonna say you're on the same record label as Melvin's, man, and like that makes me like smile in itself because to me, you guys are two parts of the same. Like the madness, the creativity. Yeah, they're a little more metallic than you. You're a little more hardcore than them. But at the end of the day, like I love the two bands for the same goddamn reason. Like I'm gonna be 100% honest. Like the creative interest, unusual side. Boring music is boring. Like the reason why I love Oxbow is because every record is different. Every record is something new. Like I knew coming into the new one, don't expect, because if you do, you're gonna be disappointed. Like, just go in and know you're gonna hear Eugene croon every once in a while. You're gonna hear Niko make beautiful noise, and then you're gonna hear these thick, heavy, crazy rhythms, like with weird instrumentation. So thank you very much for that. I just want to say, like, that's the reason why I want to talk to you guys, because for, oh God, what, 30 years now, I've loved you. And when I even thought I had an opportunity to talk to you, I literally was telling my friends, I'm like, dude, I'm gonna get to talk to Oxbow. Like, that's goddamn cool. Like, that's just cool. I get to talk to, like, not being a fan, but like actually getting to talk to a band that I respect, if you know what I mean. Like, that's kind of where I'm at. So
Awesome.
yeah. So the last question I'm gonna have, so we can wrap this up, is if there was one artist or one band that you could give your music to and have them rework it, who would it be and why? I don't care who starts first. Any of you can say anything. So.
I would give it to like Dr. Dre. That's something, and I say that's not a wild hair thing. We auditioned before Thin Black Duke. We auditioned a bunch of mastering people, and one of the mastering people, we said, like, something like, here's 30 seconds of a song, show us what you could do with, we had to pay for this. And one of the people that had done it is like a hot shot mastering guy, but mostly for hip hop music, right? And he, of course, was looking for, an avenue out of just doing hip hop music all the time. But then when we got his version, his 30-second version of a song off of, Thin Black Duke, it was so jarring to me that I was like, this is crazy. No, I don't. Oxbow is Tupac. I know but then in the fullness of time, as my mind keeps returning to what he did when he mastered that 30 seconds of a song, I go, that, he actually heard elements in the music that were there that I had never heard, right? So I figured, wow, if he gave it to Dr. Dre, something like that might be the craziest, almost coolest thing ever. So,
nice.
Yeah.
Dan or Niko, I don't care, either one. What do you think?
It's funny. I was just, I would probably give it to Jason Moran, who is somebody who just came up in topic at the last rehearsal, because some of the others had heard an interview, and I had found some of his records. Actually heard him play a concert about 10 years ago or so, and just have been mesmerized, at least by a couple of the records that I have, the ability to take so many elements together and present them in just a absolutely beautiful way. Whether they're taking, stuff that was just completely on the fringes of free jazz, or very, very traditional music, mixing in modern influences all the way to hip hop and whatever other types of grooves, all in the context, it still sounds like, a beautiful acoustic jazz record or whatever. So anyways, I think that would be my vote.
Just to say, our mastering experiment, we didn't pay those folks. They mastered. We had like 7.
Good.
Yeah, we didn't pay them, and they mastered the entire song. And that was like such an awful idea. It was so much fun. Anyway, and they all did such great jobs. It was fascinating and way too much information. They talk about, do I want to X-ray my spine? Well, there's things you're going to learn things that you don't want to know.
Right.
We learned things in that, comparing the mastering, that was just too much information. I have no idea, Clint. That's a fascinating thing. I think about Opeth, because that guy can scream and he can sing very clearly. The music is complex and it's so controlled. Some of our older songs, I think, I love the recordings, but perhaps they suffered because of a lack of clarity, a lack of going from A to B in a way that people can understand. So I wouldn't go back and change our recordings. I'd be interested in what that guy would do. I don't think that the sweaty element is there enough in Opeth to really, but that's good. It would be different. That's not enough. That's such a fascinating question. I'm going to think about that for a while. So that's the thing that comes to mind first, because I would love people to cover our music. I wish people would, because I'd love to hear somebody else do it, because what we do is so personal to us, but it doesn't have to be. I think there are songs that people could play. So do it. Anyway, go ahead.
One way to look at that is, who would you like to have interpret our music? Another is, who would you like to subject to playing our music and see what happens? And I was just thinking, Rich, just Metallica would be pretty interesting, right?
No, awesome. Again, it's been an absolute honor to be able to talk with the three of you guys. I am so happy to get to do this. Just don't make it another 6 years between records. That's all I can say.
Oh no, we planned ahead. We have no, seriously, we have 9 already recorded. So
awesome. Yeah, because like I love the band, and waiting 6 years for another record was an event. But like when I knew a new record was coming, I was very happy. But again, no, thank you so much, Clint from The Doorway too, hanging out with Eugene, Niko, and Dan from Oxbow. And like I said, once this is up, I will make sure that the whole world knows and you guys get it as well. But thank you for hanging out with me on a Saturday morning.
Thank you very much.
Pleasure.
All right. Thanks, Clint.
Thanks, Clint. Take care.